Hey everybody, it's Justin Berg with Purple Care and Lawn Therapy. Today I've got Dr. Mike Arnold over at Texas A&M. Mike, why don't you go over, kind of who you are, your credentials, and what you do for the school?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I enjoy the opportunity to be here.
You bet.
I am a director of the gardens here in half of my life. Being a little schizophrenic, I've got another half of my life in the department as a professor of landscape horticulture. And I teach and do research in areas of plant materials and new plant development, and then oversee the wonderful opportunities we have here in the garden.
Excellent. Very good. You said that you still teach, correct?
Oh, yes, sir.
Very good.
I've got 3 classes this semester.
What are they? What are the 3 classes?
There are undergraduate plant materials for trees and shrubs, the graduate version of that, and then we have a special problems graduate course as well that we're teaching. So I teach 4 plant materials courses, and in the past I taught a lot of other landscape courses.
Very good. Yeah, Joseph, your guy, walking around your garden, I think you guys did a really good job. I'm a big believer of durable plants. I keep on saying that in all my podcasts. Is like I'm not into I like pretty, don't get me wrong. Everyone likes pretty, but I'm really into durable. And if pretty comes along with it, then I'm happy. But I like durable stuff that's going to make it through our Texas winters and our Texas summers and our rain, our lack thereof, and the salts. And so you guys have done a nice job with getting plants that I think people can walk through here and get a really good palette of what's going to work in Central Texas.
Well, and we try not to do things that the homeowner wouldn't be able to do because we want them to come out and see what they can actually grow in the region, in the landscape. We try to have a background, just as you mentioned, of those reliable, tough plants that are going to be there and going to be readily easy for people to grow. And then we like to throw in some unusual things, show them some things they might try, and every once in a while we try something that doesn't work. We figure it works until we've killed it 3 times.
It's actually a good number, yeah. So now there's some plants. There's a couple that even I'm pretty good with my plant knowledge or plant ID, but there's a few out there. That one African, I think it was your African. Yeah, that's how new it is to me. Tracks the bees, though. That plant I was very impressed with, and I will.
Was this the African blue basil?
Yes, yes. I was very impressed with that plant. The amount of bees on that were better than anything else I saw in the garden today.
And that is the easiest plant to propagate and grow. I'm amazed with it. We have raised all the plants you see. We keep some stock plants, and those were all propagated as 4-inch cuttings.
Oh, wow.
Or 4-inch pots this spring, and went out, and they're full. Look like bushel baskets now.
Wow.
And they bloom literally all summer long.
Yeah, I was actually embarrassed to have to, I'm sorry, but I have not used this yet. And I don't know if our nurseries down in DFW I'm sure they do, but I don't see that plant a lot.
You may have to look for it a little bit, but it is in the trade. It's also available online if you need to. But that's one as I understand, it's a hybrid cultivar between the American basil and another species of basil. And so it is a selected clone. And so you want to make sure you're getting cutting propagated materials.
Okay. Yeah, I ate some of it. It was actually kind of like a minty but oregano kind of flavor of that. But I liked it. I mean, it was kind of neat. So I just had a leaf of it. I tried it, but I was crazy. The amount of bees was amazing.
Yeah, that's one of those plants. If you can't find honeybees anywhere in a garden, it'll be there.
Yeah.
So yeah. That and the kidney wood is another one that is really good, a native shrub for honeybees. And we also have a variety of other plants that we put in over time. Many of them in the mint family and things that are salvias and that.
Yes. Big salvia fan. I do plant a lot of. So they just because they're durable, they seem to make it. They please. I mean, they're beautiful, and yet they come back every year, and you can trim them, however you want if you need to.
What I love is there's whole books written on just salvias, which of course probably puts you to sleep pretty well. But the key is that no matter where you're gardening in the country, it may not be the same salvia, but one of them is going to work for you.
Correct. Yeah. I've been up in Boston recently, and I was shocked to see salvias up there. I'm like, what do you guys? That's a Mexican plant. That's a plant that I believe originated in Mexico, and they're making it up there. I'm like, if you can make it up there in that weather, even though their soil is much different, it's very acidic, which that salvia kind of leans towards a high pH soil, alkaline soil,
Yeah, especially our native ones from out in the
Yes.
hill country in West Texas.
Yeah. They're just an awesome plant. They do very well. You said that you teach classes in plant material. Tell me more. What is that? Tell me more.
Well, basically, I have about 100 students in those classes this semester, and the majority of those are either studying horticulture, landscape horticulture areas, or they're landscape architecture. So those classes are required for both of those majors. And so in the fall, we teach the backbone of the landscape, the trees and shrubs. And then in the spring, we look at a variety of other classes of plants, everything from annuals and perennials to vines, ground covers, ornamental grasses, cacti and succulents, water garden plants.
Sure.
The whole gamut of materials we might use. And so in their laboratories, they learn to identify a usable palette of plants for our area. Of course, correct scientific names on those. We are a tier 1 institution, right?
Sure.
And then in lecture, we focus on how they would be utilized. And basically, we're asking them to learn 5 answers for a plant.
Okay.
Why would I plant it? So aesthetic properties, ecosystem services, anything that would justify its use in the landscape. Why wouldn't I plant it? Because no plant's perfect.
Right.
So what's its liabilities? Is it poisonous? Does it have invasive tendencies? Is it one that requires extensive pruning, thorns, etc.? And then we'll say, where will it grow? Okay, what kind of absolute requirements does it have? And then where won't it grow? So we're not putting it in the wrong place. And then does it have any other significant cultural, economic uses? It's a state tree like the pecan, things like that. So we kind of encourage the students that they can come up with good answers for those 5 questions for a nice palette of plants. Then we can talk about how they can combine those to create a ecologically friendly landscape and one that's very aesthetically appealing and sustainable over time.
Very nice. I'm going to steal that from you if I can, if you don't mind. I'm going to actually maybe put that on our website, but I'll be watching this video later. I typically go through and I'll be watching that because I'm going to write all those 5 down. But that should be something that we should be giving every one of our customers, or to explain that to them. Like, here's the 5 things, because we get asked all the time. Like, I noticed you don't have any azaleas in your garden. I'm pretty happy about that, by the way. Maybe you snuck one in on me, but I didn't see any.
Azaleas are short-term annuals here.
Yeah, they are. And and when people ask for them, I'm like, my first question is, all right, first of all, where are you from? And because that usually is why. Like, if they were from Georgia or maybe East Texas, they're like, well, that's, and I'm like, I can plant one. It's going to look good for a little bit, but it's not going to, it's just a matter of time before it goes down. You just don't want to. I really try to encourage people not to. And so that's what, it's going to answer one of those 5 questions. But that's why I tell people, if it can meet those 5, that's what you really want in Texas. For Texas, I know we're known for being tough. We're known for being rugged. And that's kind of what our plants are like, too. And that's how they need to be. And like I said, if we get pretty out of that as well, fantastic. But one thing I've learned, and I'm sure that you teach this, is that I've learned that there's different beauties in like just the different textures. Like right behind you right now, you've got a Artemisia, which has a very different texture and a very different feel to it, but also coloring, different green than, say, the crinum lily right next to it. And so just the differences in the textures and the colors. And I've learned that I found that foliage alone is beautiful to me. Like, it's like, I don't have to have flowers anymore for things to be beautiful. If I have different textures and foliages and I've mixed them correctly, it's gorgeous. And
you're hitting on some of the key aesthetic issues that we try and impart to the students. We talk to them about, everybody loves the flowers, and flowers are wonderful, but we have a lot of other aspects of the plants: the fruits, the fruiting structures, the leaves, the foliage, the form of the plant, the growth habit, the branching structure. All of those things can be assets that we can highlight in the landscape and combine into pleasing combinations. I think that's one of the things that is a misconception about tropical environments. Everybody thinks, hibiscus and all these beautiful tropical flowers, and they are a component. But if you really look into a lot of the tropical landscapes, the vast majority of it is green.
It's green.
And so you can combine different shades, tints, tones, and shades of green.
Yes.
And different textural forms, and still create really interesting landscapes. So it's a nice example to point to.
Yeah, I agree. And you guys have done that here at your gardens for sure. I like what you've done. So if I can ask, I always like to ask, what is your favorite tree or favorite plant or both?
That's a tough question. But I tell you what, I really like
You have
bald
multiple answers.
cypress.
Okay.
I really like bald cypress, and then some of the oak species. I grew up in Ohio, and so we had a lot of beautiful oaks that were there. And so probably I'll take the bald cypress, because I think when I go, they can. I'm a beach bum at heart. And they can scatter my ashes down there, plant a bald cypress down around the coast somewhere for me.
I like it. So. Yeah, rugged tree, durable tree. I mean, I know that I've gone tubing along rivers like around Lakey, Texas.
Oh, beautiful.
And all those bald cypresses that just line that river, and all the knobs and like that's all the knees or whatever. It's just really kind of cool looking. But it's different kinds of bald cypresses as well. They're pretty interesting. So, and what to talk about, we don't get a lot of tall trees in Texas, and that's one of them that beats that. So,
well, kind of one of that also brings up something else that we'll talk to students about and try and get them to realize is that all bald cypress aren't created equally. So there are the variety that's pond cypress. There's a variety that's Montezuma cypress.
Yeah.
Those have different tolerances for wet conditions. They have different tolerances for salinity, alkalinity, and pH issues that are there. So it brings up the idea of provenance, or where is the seed source originally genetically adapted to. And it's really important that you develop relationships with nurseries who know where their materials come from and can help you to match them up with the type of conditions in your landscape.
Kind of like the pine trees over here, where you think you guys got those.
Correct. Those are Bastrop pines, and that's from the Lost Pines.
Right.
And they're about 90 miles west of the westernmost native populations of them, and so they've got an additional drought tolerance to them.
That's amazing to me. Yeah. That is a tree that grew up 90 miles away. The loblolly pine is a loblolly pine. I mean, the ones that grew up in East Texas versus the ones that grew up in the Lost area. That's really amazing that tree evolved to where it's more drought tolerant, and it's pretty.
Apparently, the foresters tell me that it was on old ocean dunes from when the oceans used to be further inland, and as they retreated, it left dunes there, and the dune areas were where that species colonized and persisted over there, outcompeting the other things around it. So,
interesting. I did not know that. Yeah, it's interesting that is, I guess not all trees are created equal, right? Yeah. So pretty interesting. How about plants? What's your favorite plant that you really like to plant?
I tell you what, when I was growing up as a kid, I always I had a great aunt who used to run a small greenhouse, and every spring our parents and I would go to get plants there, and she would always let my sister and I pick out a couple of plants to take home. And I always had to pick out moss rose was one of them I loved, and then pansies. And I could never understand why the pansies always died for me in the summer. Well, I didn't realize they were a cool season plant, but that was a couple of the favorites. I love some of the old-fashioned cornflowers, the centaureas. They're kind of a cool one we're playing with right now, where we're trying to say, well, usually we spring plant it, but as in the warmer parts of the state down here, we can fall plant that. It'll go through most of our winters, and then it blooms really early in the spring and is a nice early spring addition to the plant palette, kind of a non-conventional use of it. Same way with like marigolds and zinnias. This is a great time to plant those, even though we kind of think of those as being a spring or summer plant.
Right.
They make a nice substitute for chrysanthemums in the fall, and they have a lot longer bloom window.
cycle, yeah.
So, you kind of, the old Mary Mom concept that Jerry Parsons and some of them pushed a while back.
And I think you guys are, we're in DFW, so we're, 2.5 hours north of you. And even that's enough to change that to where it's just enough to where some of the our freezes kick in just a tad earlier. It's not much of a difference, but also the salt in your guys. So we don't see the salt levels that you guys do it. I'm not saying we don't see it. We do. Our pH is sky high, but the salt sounds it just seems to be a consistent issue that I keep on seeing around this area. Is that true?
Yes, exactly. Our typical tap water here that you pull out, when we do tests on it, it's about 500 parts per million of bicarbonates, 250 parts per million of sodium.
Oh, wow.
And it has a pH of about 8.3 to 8.7. So, Benny Simpson, who was one of the co-founders of the Native Plant Society, once described College Station irrigation water as College Station herbicide.
He's correct. Well, yeah, so our pH is definitely higher than yours. It's high, which is difficult, makes it real tough for us, but we don't deal with the salt issues as much. So,
well, and one of the things we also try and demonstrate here in the gardens is what we do is put our overhead irrigation is on the turf areas where they can tolerate it.
Yeah.
And then the vast majority of the rest of the garden is all on low volume irrigation, drip or sub-canopy micro sprinklers. And that keeps the salt off of the foliage. And you can greatly broaden the amount of plants that you can utilize if you are exposing the root system rather than the shoots to the salt.
That's interesting. I didn't think of that because we don't have to do that. We use the drip for other reasons, but that's pretty interesting. I didn't realize it.
It's a great water conservation technique as well.
Yeah.
But that's our big reason here is simply to keep the salinity off of the foliage.
Interesting. Maybe just explain to people, what does salt do to the soil? Like, that's the biggest thing it does. What does it do?
Salt does not do a lot of good things to your soil.
Right.
Salt in and of itself, and usually we're talking about sodium salts, but they're fertilizer. If you over apply them, are salts. We can get salts from other sources, runoffs, salt spray from highways, obviously salt spray if you're in the coastal areas. But a lot of times the salt will tend to destroy the structure in the soil over time, cause deflocculation of the particles in the soil, and that affects the drainage and the nutrient holding capacity of those soils and the penetration of water through those soils. So it has a lot of negative impacts on it.
Yes, it does.
And so managing salinity is a big issue, basically anywhere, whether it's in the irrigation water or in arid regions where it may be in the soils themselves.
Yeah. I always kind of question, I've seen fertilizers that have salt in them. It's one of the bonding agents I believe they use. I'm like, why would you? We don't use those. I'm like, we're not going to use those. But why would you do that? You're adding salt in your fertilizer when fertilizer is getting it locked up with salt.
Salts as a chemical definition are not sodium chloride, which is table salt.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, that is a salt, and that's one that's a problem for us. But many of the fertilizer salts are simply a dissociation of the anion and the cation, so the positive and negative charged particles in the molecules that make up the fertilizer. As those dissociate, they have a salinity impact. And so all fertilizers, to some extent, other than just organic matter, tend to have some salts.
Yeah.
And you're hoping you're doing more good by adding the nutrients than you are the negative by having the salinity effect. And that's the case as long as we're using proper amounts and we're not in an area where salinity is already an issue.
Yeah. I know that I've tried to use fertilizers that are more organic, which is hard to find good ones, and ones that because the delivery methods are different. It's not quite as, but I've tried to use ones that are going to have a lot of what you just said, which is going to be this materials correct. Like if you use the right material to deliver that product, then we can knock down our salts. And that's kind of the way we try to do it. I'm not saying it's perfect, but we try to do it. We've also tried to use different aeration things that the liquid aerate, which opens up the soil and kind of lets it go. So we've tried to, I know there's some people think they don't work, but I've seen them work pretty well, especially if you use them in the spring. It really opens things up.
Some people will come in and do analogous to fracking. Fracking's got a bad connotation related to oil exploration sort of things. But they'll go in and do an air loosening of the soil, and a lot of that can have some positive impacts.
It does. I see it around trees where like they do the air spading. That actually 100% works. I mean, it's very interesting to watch done, by the way.
We will do that in here where we have some areas that get compacted on a regular basis. We'll come in and do that.
Sure.
And around campus, they'll do that some as well. One of the things with the fertilizers, and the plant doesn't recognize a difference whether it's organic or inorganic because they're taking up a certain chemical form of the nutrient. However, a lot of our organic chemicals or organic fertilizers that have composted materials in them have added benefits of providing a longer term source of the nutrients and water holding capacity and slow release of it. Now, we can get controlled release inorganic fertilizers, and those are fine as well. But a lot of times they won't affect kind of the tilth of the soil the way some of the organic materials will if you mix in large volumes.
I agree. And it's really, when I say organic fertilizer, it's really organic matter that we try to use, like kind of because I believe in that very much, because I always say, what's the difference between the synthetic fertilizer and what comes out of the backside of a bull's hind end? And because nitrogen is nitrogen, you can't cut it down. It's an element of the earth. But the difference is that when it comes out in a cow patty, if you will, on the ground, what's left over turns into organic matter. And that's the difference. And it breaks down into soil. And now it's delivered differently, where the synthetic is typically gone up in the air. A lot of people think it leaches down. No, it actually goes up for the most part, but it goes up in about 30 to 45 days. It's gone. Like we can pull a soil sample and it's not even there anymore. It depends on the type you're using.
Right. Especially if it's not a controlled release formulation.
Yeah. Like slow release controlled. Yeah. So that's why I'm like, the organic matter and that's organic matter. Like it's not just organic, because everyone says, a lot of people are like, we want to be organic. I'm like, if it's all organic, it's not going to work too well. But I do believe in getting organic matter involved. I think my very favorite thing to do to any lawn or even garden is top dress. If you just let me top dress your yard, I will make that thing look spectacular.
Yeah, organic matter can be that magic elixir in the garden at times.
Yeah.
Timing your fertility is a real art over time. In our area, oddly enough, we have these long periods of drought, but then we'll also have deluges of rain that tend to leach a lot of your nutrients out of the soils. And so monitoring your soils and keeping optimal levels of fertility is probably one of the more critical things you're going to do for a garden.
I agree. And it's something we try to time. I mean, I'm sure you guys look at soil temperature. I'm sure you guys look at the air temperature. You look at the moisture levels. I mean, those are all things like when people say, hey, I can go down to the Home Depot and grab a bag of fertilizer. I'm like, you're correct, 100% correct. One, I don't know what's in that bag. I know it's in our bag, 100%. What we know what we want in there. We blend our own. We make sure we go to the toller and make it.
That's a really good point that you make. Is here we have soils that tend to bind up some of our micronutrients. So some of our local garden centers actually have formulations that are specific to our soil types. And that's what we try to use in addition to some of the organic matter. We make sure that we're getting formulations that have the nutrients we need. And other times you can also build nutrients to super optimal levels. That sounds great, but you can actually get into toxicity. So it's important to soil test periodically and make sure that the nutrients you're applying aren't over applying it, whatever the ones that are becoming at high levels.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. I've seen that before as well, where it's too
Particularly
much.
phosphorus is one that can build up over time.
Well, and it's crazy because we have phosphorus in all of our, we're loaded with phosphorus. Our soils are loaded. It's just, we don't have access to it, And so what I tell people is what I want to do is why is there no phosphorus on your bag? And I'm like, because one, we can put it in there, but I'd rather do is add something that's going to open up the existing phosphorus in your soil if I can get that to activate. That's what I'm trying to do the best I can. Don't get me wrong, I still have to put some phosphorus in that bag because you need if you're trying to look at root growth, then you need that kind of that quick release, if you will, or that quick snap. But for longevity, we try to really work on balancing the soil to where they can use the phosphorus that's there the whole time, because no matter where you go to, every pull, the phosphorus seems to be there, but just the plants don't have access to it. So get your soil balanced. I think that's number one, and that seems to be, way to go. Tell me more about your landscape classes, as far as, are you teaching people how to become a landscaper and go into the commercial world, or are you teaching?
My particular portion is to teach the components related to the plants and their utilization in the landscape settings. We do have other faculty members who are working on particularly design aspects, maintenance, construction, and establishment. I've done a lot of work with tree establishment in landscapes. And so we've moved everything from 10 by 10 by 4 foot box bur oaks with weigh 20 tons to, 1 gallon seedling materials. And primarily we would look at trying to improve methods for establishment and that. And that's more on my research background. That, and we work with a lot of native plants, trying to make advanced selections out of them. If you think about it, we've been selecting a lot of exotic species for hundreds or even thousands of years sometimes. So we've picked the best of the best of the best from around the world, and then we try and bring them into our areas. Right. And sometimes they have pretty attractive properties that may make it hard for some of our native materials to compete in the trade with them from the consumer appeal standpoint. So one of our goals is to try and take some of our native plants with potential and try and select materials that will have improved aesthetic values while keeping some of the adaptivity of the native plants. And that way we can compete with some of the more exotic plants that might be there.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Very good. Tell me more about what you're doing with raised gardens or raised beds.
Yeah, that's one of our secrets to being able to have some diversity and success in the landscape. Many of our local soils, you may have a sandy loam short over the top, but many of them are degraded agricultural soils where that sandy loam's been lost over time, and you're working with a heavy montmorillonite type clays underneath. And for those that aren't up on soils, those heavily expansive clays, and you see those a lot in the DFW area as well. Kind of the noontime soils. Before noon they're too wet, afternoon they're too dry. Right. So we have that same challenges here. And so one of the ways we'll get around that and give a broader, more desirable root zone for the plants to grow is to have raised beds or work with container materials. Nice thing about container materials is seasonally you can come in, change the appearance of your landscape very easily, and also grow some exotic things. So if, let's say, you really, really grew up loving azaleas, well, they're dead meat in the College Station soils if you're planting them out. But if you're willing to grow them in a container and water them with rainwater rather than our tap water, then that's an option for you. You wouldn't do that on a massive scale, but if you sentimentally wanted to grow an azalea, or say a blueberry and pick a few blueberries, well, instead of killing them in the soils, you could use them in the containers.
Sure. Sure. What's one of your biggest difficulties here? I mean, other than the salt, I'm going to take the salt away, but things that one of your biggest difficulties when
Well,
landscaping.
our biggest difficulty, you got to look at it. It's all trade off. But one of the biggest challenges that we have as a garden and generally our region here is we're sort of that in between. We're not far enough south that the true subtropicals, they're going to get hit every once in a while on us. So we can grow some palms, but it's a limited number, and they're going to get damaged occasionally. But on the same side of the coin, if we grow the more northern materials, they often don't get adequate winter chilling here to satisfy dormancy. And some of our summers are a little bit too hot during the daytime and especially at night when respiration's high, that we'll either starve them to death or they won't get adequate chilling and you won't get bud break. So we're kind of on that in-between area where the good news is we can get quite a number of them to survive, but to get them to thrive is a different story. And so that's really our biggest challenge is trying to guess what's going to be the conditions we've got to deal with the next few years, and throwing in some of the changes we've had with climate in the last few years and extremes that have come through. We've had everything from 2 of our record cold winters in the last 3 years to our hottest summer ever and one of our longest drought periods ever in the summer.
Yeah.
And that's all in succession. That's really hard on plants. And in particular, what we're seeing as a challenge is that even some things that you wouldn't think would have problems, like post oaks or eastern red cedar, the combination of those things over time is depleting them from reserves, and we're losing some large old specimens that way.
Yes, I agree. I asked one of my favorite arborists that I know, a good guy, great guy, master arborist, and I asked him what his favorite tree is, and he said a post oak, which I thought was the only person who's ever said post oak, because most people complain about that tree, but you can't get it in a container, you can't buy it at a nursery, it's only out in the woods. And you've got a phenomenal one right behind me. That's amazing.
Yeah, poor Old Sarge is the name on it.
Old Sarge.
He's had 2 borer infestations we've had to treat recently, and we had to do some cabling and bracing on one.
I saw the cabling.
And so we're keeping our fingers crossed on that tree. We'd really hate to lose it. It's the biggest documented post oak in Brazos County and ranks about 12th or 13th statewide. So
it's impressive.
Yeah, we're a beautiful tree.
It is.
We're out there kind of doing our morning prayers over it every morning, hoping it'll pull through for us.
The wingspan is amazing. I mean, I don't know if you've actually stepped off the wingspan, but it's
incredible.
Yeah, it's over. I bet you it's over 100 feet on wingspan, so that's pretty amazing.
And it sets down in that alluvial soils near the creek, and we're on a little bit higher elevation here, so you don't really realize how large the tree is until you go down and stand by it and look up.
Yeah, the bottom side.
It is a massive material.
Yeah.
A lot of people, our students, that's one thing we'll talk about is you talk about rainforest preservation, you talk about preserving the redwoods or large trees everywhere around the world. We actually are living in the middle of an old growth forest.
Yeah.
Post oak savanna, many of those trees are in excess of 100, 200, 300 years old, and they're not replaceable tomorrow. Yeah.
No.
So.
Yeah, it is. When I first moved to Texas, I thought the post oak was a terrible oak because if there was any construction around it, this thing just didn't do well, and I realized it's actually a very cool oak. My respect for that tree has grown tremendously, just because you can't go by it. It's out in the woods, and so you better take care of it. And you can build around. You just got to be careful with it. You got to be smart about it. So, I mean, if you've got an awesome post oak in your yard or in a lot that you're building in, there's arborists that know how to take care of that to get that thing ready for what it's going to go through. Like it's going to go through some very stressful periods, and if you can prep it ahead of time, that arborist typically can get it through. So they will make it. That most people the builders don't know and don't care, and they will just literally stomp all
Yeah,
over.
and doing it after the fact is very hard
Correct.
to remediate.
Yeah.
You really need to have the arborist involved before the actual construction
I agree with
takes
you.
place.
Yeah.
I just put a plug in for the International Society of Arboriculture, if people aren't familiar with that. Wonderful organization, and they do certify arborists that have to go through regimented training and constant constant
Continuing
renewal,
education, yeah.
continuing education. And so I would always look for a ISA certified arborist if I'm going out, and with you, getting them involved from the beginning
Yeah.
is what you want.
It's interesting. I don't mind saying that, but we charge roughly, let's call it $170 for like a arbor visit, for our arborist. He's master arborist, good guy, just, great guy, smart, loves trees. Just the kind of guy you want as an arborist, not just making money. But there's people that have 150-year-old oaks that don't want to spend the 170 for just the evaluation, but I can't send him out there for free.
Right.
Because I'm paying him and we're paying him. But people, I'm like, that tree, you can't buy a tree for $150 that's even close to that.
Well, if you suspect something might be an issue with your car, and you have a Rolls Royce, which is what some of these are equivalent to, you wouldn't think twice about going into a mechanic, and a good mechanic, and paying them a fee to make sure that vehicle was in good working order.
Right.
Yeah, same idea.
It really is. Yeah. I'm like, it's worth saving these trees. Like, you want to get an arborist. Take the time, I don't care if it's with me or anyone else, just spend the time to get an arborist out for $170 or $200, whatever they charge, and have them evaluate that, especially before. I think those are worth it, because that's a feature on your property that you can't replicate. Once they're gone, you're not going to be able to bring in those trees. Or if you do, you're going to be spending literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on trying to bring in these massive trees, which I'm not a big fan of anyway.
Yeah. It's challenging. You can do it, but it's challenging, and
It is.
It's interesting. I actually did a long-term study a number of years ago that was published in one of the Arboriculture and Urban Forestry journals, that we propagated a red maple clone, a bald cypress clone, and a vitex clone sequentially in the nursery, growing the same exact growing conditions, and had them maturing so that at the same time we had 1 gallon, 7 gallon, 15 gallon, 25 gallon, and 45 gallon plants that were then planted into field plots in multiple random designs, and each with separate irrigation, so we're not over or under irrigating the given plants, and then watch the growth of those. What we ended up finding was that within about a 3-year period of time, with the vitex and the red maple, the 1 gallons caught up with the 45 gallons.
No kidding.
And now on bald cypress, a little bit slower growing, it
Right.
took it longer to do that. But you can, if you're willing to forego the immediate benefits of a larger plant looking better, being immediate shade, and that you can achieve very similar impacts using smaller materials and being patient to let them catch up.
Well, I think they acclimate to the soil. They acclimate. So just kind of like that loblolly pine, it acclimated. Now it's used to it. Where when you transplant, if you think of it, it's almost like children. Unfortunately, if you were to get a young child, they usually acclimate to a new environment, right? But if you were to adopt a 14-year-old kid, it's going to be tough. I'm not saying you can't do it, and you still should, but it's going to be tougher for that child to acclimate to that environment, right? Sure. And so,
well, you change old folks like me where we're at, and we don't acclimate quite as well. Which also kind of brings up an interesting topic, one that we talk about to students, is you have to know your plants and you have to know what their life cycles are. And one of the reasons we might do that is if you are developing a site and you're deciding what plants do I want to go to the trouble of trying to preserve on that side an in situ plant that we want to be a part of the new design? We have to know something about the age and maturity levels of those plants. No point in investing a lot of money in a plant that's near its life cycle end and near decline.
Right.
Better to put your resources into preserving vigorous intermediate age material.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I always encourage people, I said, if you can be patient, if you can just be patient, is better to start off smaller. Just, and then now that I've got your data, I didn't know that tree story you just told me of that 1 to 45 gallon. Was it 1 or was it 3 to 45?
1 to 45.
1 to 45, and that 1 cut to 45 in 3 years.
Yes.
That is amazing.
Yeah. That was Vitex. Red maple took about another year, and then the bald cypress about a year after that.
But still, within 5 years, you're getting a job done.
Right.
So, I mean, that's amazing. Gotta tell people, I mean, a 15-gallon tree is probably a great starting point. It's kind of, you got a little bit.
Yeah, actually, if we did some economic analysis with an economist, and it did turn out the 7 to 15 gallon size were the ones that were more consistently the good value.
Hey, you know what? I'm gonna say what I tell my employees. I'm not just a pretty face. I'm glad. That's because I've been telling people. I really think that 10, 15 gallon is your girl. That's the one you want. I go, that's the one I've seen. Just they do well. They're not too expensive because you're not going to kill yourself spend, on a 4-inch caliper tree. You're not going to kill yourself buying that kind of money. But that thing's going to get there. It's going to can you be patient and let it acclimate? And that's really about the right size. Like crepe myrtles, I'm a big fan of about a 10 to 15 gallon crepe myrtle. Fine, So although I will take that Vitex over a crepe myrtle all day long, I love that tree.
Well, one of the big things in our soils here too, and any other clay soils, is I would rather plant the tree high than put a little low. We've done a number of studies over the years looking at different materials, and what we find is as little as 3 inches too low can result in massive reductions in survival and growth. And that's a lot of people will put them that low just to not have to stake as much.
Correct.
And long term, you're causing some problems.
You are. I've actually been almost fired from a customer because they said that I planted the tree wrong. Because they said, look at how lazy your guys are. They left it that far sticking out of the ground.
That's ideal.
And I'm like, that's actually exactly what you want. They're like, no, your guys didn't dig the hole deep enough. I'm like, I promise you in Texas, I said, do you see those root flares? I got to see that entire root flare. I need to see all that. And I said, well, there's roots sticking out. I'm like, that tree's going to adapt. That tree's going to figure it out. And I said, if you want to put a very light layer of mulch around that to kind of cover those, if that makes you feel better. But that tree is just like it should be. I said, that thing's going to reach out and set down. And if you plant it deep, I mean, just like same thing with the, we call it in our office, the tree volcanoes where they put the mulch.
Oh yeah, please, no more than 2 to 3 inches.
We go out there, yeah,
and not against the trunk.
Yeah, exactly. But we see it. I think now I will tell you, you can probably get away with it up north. I mean, where I've seen the tree volcanoes, and maybe that species up there can handle it.
Yeah,
maybe, I don't know, but ours, no way. No, you've got to plant those trees high, and I think even not just trees. I think a lot of plants do better when they're planted a little higher. Right. So we actually try to plant even our plants not super high because it's harder because you have a smaller root.
And you don't want to dry out too much.
But the trees, 100%. So.
And that's particularly important when we're looking at container-grown materials that are in a mulch or a pine bark material, because that's going to degrade and the plant's going to tend to settle. A little less of problematic when it's bald and burlap material. But,
yeah, very good. What the students that you come seeing them, what do you see them going towards? Like, I mean, I'm always looking. In my field, I'm always looking for good people to come into our industry. You'd think it'd be like, hey, I don't want the competition. I'm like, no, we need good people in this business. So do you see a lot of kids coming through? Is it
I think in our area, and I'm speaking more in landscape general, and in the nursery industry, et cetera. I think most of the people come into it as much because they have an advocation for growing plants and in many cases working with people, which is as important as being interested in the plants. And they're looking at doing something that's rewarding that they can make a reasonable living at. And so I think where we're seeing most of the students now is coming in horticulture in general. We're seeing a lot of interest in community gardening, in the local grown food areas, and that is a big interest area in them. And then in the landscape areas, of course, there's a lot of interest in design. But I keep telling them probably the bigger job opportunities are in the construction and maintenance aspects of the green industry. And of course, from the landscape architects that we get in, our biggest goal is to try and get them to have an appreciation for plants and how their designs impact maintenance and long-term success of the landscape. Rather than just painting a pretty picture, you want something that's going to be a nice movie over time.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I don't want landscape architects to dislike me when I say this, but I've been very frustrated by some of their designs. And I think they're trying to honestly do the right thing. And I think they're probably good designers. They're very smart, but I've also seen the wrong plants. Like, I'm like, why are we putting this tree in here? Like I know right now I've got one where it requires 50 ash trees. I'm nervous as heck to plant these trees.
Green emerald ash borer is going to be a problem.
That's why I'm like, we do not. And I said, please change that tree. And like, nope. That's what the landscape design. That's what the landscape architect said. We paid big money for this design. And I'm like, it's an ash tree. It is not recommended. It is. I'm telling you, we're going to have problems with this down the road. You're going to have problems with it. Well past my warranty stage. Right. You're going to have, because it's usually the newer ones. They don't have the damages usually. The newer, freshly planted ones typically, and you can add some things to it to kind of deter. But once those things are down and they're established a few years, that's when you're going to see that. And we're seeing it in Texas. I mean, have you seen it very much down here? I know we see it north.
I tell you what, it's just been reported that it may be here. So we're not technically confirmed in the county, but they're seeing it moving towards us. So it's just a matter of time.
We've got them. I mean, we've got that. And I like the ash tree. I mean, it's got a nice leaf structure, but it's just a tree I don't think I'd take a risk on until I figure out how to get rid of that emerald ash borer. And I'm sure I know there's things you can do, but again, we're talking about durability and low maintenance. That's a lot of maintenance, if you ask me. And it's a very big risk. That's a lot of money to spend on a tree.
I do see that as one of the things that in the classes, particularly landscape architecture and design students, are recognizing now the impact of their choices making longer term in the landscape. And also I'm seeing a very supportive encouragement of students and requirement of some of those classes that would allow them to gain that knowledge that is more so than in the past. And so to me, that bodes well that as we go forward, students are much more cognizant of ecosystem services and compatibility with climatic conditions and changing environment that we're going to deal with, and that they are going to have a big hand in helping us to reach that success.
I agree. What are you most excited about when it comes to your job, or when it comes to maybe landscaping?
I'm excited about the fact that when I get up in the morning, I want to jump out of bed and go to work. Not many people can say that.
Glad to hear that.
And so what I really enjoy, probably my favorite aspect of the job, is teaching the classes and trying to impart an appreciation and enthusiasm to the students about the plants we work with and that. And then the other aspect of the job with the gardens is being able to actually demonstrate and show people that, hey, even in a challenging environment, you can create a pleasing and sustainable group of plants and accomplish a number of different design aspects depending on your particular tastes and interests. And so I like the idea that we have different styles illustrated in the garden where people can see what's it going to look like when I actually get it in the ground, you know. And it's nice to see it in a container or, you know, in a balled and burlap in a nursery, or in a picture, but actually seeing what it looks like in real time, I think that's good. That's wonderful. We do have several youth-oriented programs in the garden. The Little Sprouts is probably our latest one, and it's geared towards pre-K and kind of early primary. And Kat Greer, our education volunteer coordinator, that was her brainchild, and that has been a wonderful program to see the youth getting involved and people not afraid to get their hands dirty. We play so much with screens and indoors with children now that getting them to get out and realizing, hey, it's okay to play in the dirt, you know. And
it is.
And
I think it's healthy.
It's
incredibly healthy.
It's healthy for you.
Yes, it is.
Right.
Yep.
Learn how to grow. Where's our food come from?
Yeah.
One of our favorite things, we didn't get a chance to do it this year because of the weather timing, but usually we'll try and plant the center pivot area. We got to be one of the only gardens that has center pivot functioning in it.
Pretty cool.
Of course, we are a land grant institution, right?
Yep.
With a three-phase mission. And so we'll have our colleagues from Soil and Crop Science will plant that with cotton. And then we actually will have that time to be maturing right at our fall festival. We'll give kids bags and let them go out and pick their own cotton. And then the cotton breeding program will bring a small gin in, and they'll actually gin the cotton for them so they can take home their own great big cotton balls. And then we have the Brazos Valley Spinners and Weavers Club come, and they're actually spinning and weaving the cotton into thread and denim. So
that's pretty cool.
Saying, you know, my clothes don't come from Target or Lowe's or whatever clothing store I go to. They come from cotton fields. They come from various fiber crops that we're using. And so they can connect with it. And we try and do some of the same things with edible crops to demonstrate to folks, hey, you know, your food doesn't come from the grocery store. It comes from the farm or your backyard. And see how much nicer it tastes if it's right here, fresh out of your garden.
Yeah, you cannot live through this world without a farmer in your life. You have to have. There's a farmer somewhere out there that is providing, and so it's very, very important. You know, you said that you can't wait to get to work and you're excited. I will tell you, your enthusiasm's obvious, and I think that I want to say thank you for hopefully getting other kids, and they are kids. But other kids excited about an industry that I love and that I like being in. And so I appreciate you doing that. Thanks for speaking with us today.
Well, I appreciate it. And we have many other faculty members who are equally enthusiastic about it. I think if I'm a little biased here with A&M, but I think we have done a wonderful job of preserving a small community atmosphere at a very large institution. And so within, for instance, the horticulture department or the soil and crops department or plant pathology, it becomes a mini family settings. And I think those are the things that come through in our graduates when they come out and in their experiences that they're garnering while they're here at A&M.
Wow.
So.
Very good. You've been an absolute pleasure to have on the podcast today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. I can't believe our hour's up already.
We're done. We made it. Thank you.